right, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Brand Power Analysis Podcast. Today, we have a special guest. I'll let her introduce herself. So why don't you take it away?
Hello, everybody. My name is Taryn Bushrod. I am based out of Washington, D.C. I'm a financial therapist for professional athletes.
That's awesome. Who do you actually work for right now?
Right now, I'm in the client acquisition phase of my business, but I also work acquisitions full-time.
Acquisitions full-time. So what does that kind of mean?
Oh, well,
give an easy explanation of it.
For the traditional sense, it's basically acquiring something. You're buying something or someone. That sounds bad, but you're buying a product or service or a company.
Okay. So how does that really work with athletes?
The biggest thing that I've taken from this side and applied to my business has been analyzing contracts, just learning how to work with people on a high level, high earners, how they think, how they interact with people. So a lot of the social skills, plus I guess you can say some business acumen as well.
That's very interesting. I'm going to dive in a little off subject here because I think it's an interesting subject when it comes to people who are just starting out their business and people that are make it to that next level in their business on the client side. How do you feel? What are some of the things that you see from working with, let's just say, a very small business compared to working with the higher end clients that you see in the mentality and the way that the transactions go?
I would say for a smaller business, those owners are more eager. They're more hungry, but they're also just putting themselves in a position where they just want a business deal. They don't care if it's the best deal, if it's a fair deal, if they're undercutting themselves. It's, I want this deal. I want to, establish my platform. A larger company, they are moving from a space of they have the competitive advantage. They have the years of experience. They want top dollar, probably overpriced. So you just move a little differently based on where you are in life. And I think that translates no matter what, if your expertise is, 10 plus years, you want to be paid for the years of which maybe you weren't actually making it where you wanted to go prior to the 10 years, right? So there's a difference between wanting to be paid your worth and wanting a shoe in the door.
Yeah, that's funny you say that because I kind of preach that to my clients. I mean, all the time when I'm working with them, one thing that I always have to say to them when they go, when they're making it to that next level, I have a couple of clients that we pushed them to that next tier of them being bigger, but they still have that mentality of they look at the money, which there's nothing wrong with looking at the money. You need to budget, but understanding that, hey, you hire someone who's just starting out at 15 an hour or 20 an hour, you have a lot of risk associated with that. And with that risk, you have, accounts getting suspended, your website getting hacked, your branding just not being on par. And larger companies see that and they understand it. It's the risk. So when they associate money with larger ticket clients, you associate it more with, hey, they're charging more, but they're getting a lot more done. Someone that's 15 an hour might take 100 hours to do something, where someone that's been in it for 10 years, for instance, they charge more, but it only takes them 3 to 4 hours to do the same amount of work that it would, and they associate that higher amount with less risk. They understand this person knows what they're doing. And so that what you're saying seems very on par with what I've been seeing when it comes to the higher ticket sales, and they just seem easier. I mean, wouldn't you agree? I mean, I just feel like the higher ticket ones understand, hey, you know what you're doing. I trust you. Let's just get this moving.
Yeah. And they also have a track record. They have work that actually speaks for themselves. So it's not constantly justifying the line item or the price of something. It's like, hey, this is my price. This is my work.
Mm-hmm.
And either you want to buy or you don't.
Yeah, you don't know how many prospects I get through the door that are like, "Hey, can you show us some of your work after our first call?" And I'm like, there's a whole spot on the website that showcases all that stuff, right? Like, it's already there. Or they'll email me and be like, "What's your services? We need to know some of your services." I'm like, they're all right there on the website. We prefer clients to do their due diligence before they, set up a call with us because we're busy. But
that's asking for too much.
Yeah. I'll still give them some information, but yeah, I was just on a call with a client that's probably going to move forward here pretty soon. And I was telling him it's a give-take relationship. Like, we're going to help you do that. And they're like, we need someone to help us do this. We need someone to help us do that because we don't know. And I'm like, that's what we're here for. But you also have to be willing to ask those questions. Like, if you're working with an employee, things of that nature. But that's I just wanted to bring that up because I think that anyone that's listening to this podcast, if they're an athlete or they're a business in general, or they're just, an entrepreneur pushing forward to the next level, like, yeah, it's understandable when you want to hire cheaper, but know as you grow that money equals time. I always tell my prospects that time equals money at the beginning because you're dedicating your time to do those services. And as you grow, money equals time. So you want more time to be able to grow the business or do this. So you have to start pushing money towards things that you shouldn't be delegating. So I just thought that was interesting that's kind of what you do. With that said, let's kind of get into a little bit more about your transition and what you're trying to do. Why don't you discuss your journey a little bit more and what's making you want to push forward with working with athletes?
Will do. So I find it interesting that we're doing this because initially I wanted to do sports marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And I started working in sports in middle school. I was a basketball manager that went throughout high school. When I got to college, I worked in college athletics. So I did the athletic marketing for my college. Now, for context for anybody who's watching this, I did not go to UCLA. This just happens to be my favorite sweatshirt from H&M. So I want people to know that wasn't me. So I went through college. I pursued sports marketing. I ended up working in the front office of the Mystics, but I got laid off after doing some stuff for the NBA during All-Star Weekend, all these things. But everything still came back to my collegiate experiences with helping people with budgets, understanding that there's a lot of things, a lot of people that are taken advantage of monetarily in the sports industry, whether it's people who work for teams and leagues are underpaid because there is the glory of having this team on your resume or you've worked around these people. And I think it should be the complete opposite. But hey, I don't run operations for.
I worked for the Suns. I worked for the Suns for a year and a half, and that's exactly how it was. It was, you get free tickets to the games. And it's like, well, I don't really want to go to the games anymore because all I'm doing is thinking about work and this and that. And so, yeah, no, I totally feel you on that one.
And then I had a lot of experience with some of my family members who played traveling team for basketball or football. So kind of when I got my master's in financial management, that's when things started to take a different form. It's like, hey, I'm not doing sports marketing. I kind of walked away from doing sports marketing. I got into the acquisitions field with the notion of, hey, I can negotiate these marketing deals or these brand ambassadorships. But once I took that off the table, it still came back to the root cause of people needing help managing their money. But that I took it a step further into understanding their money. I think we spoke previously about there being a lot of apprehension with athletes working with people who handle their money or in the financial realm. And yes, that's still a very, very touchy subject, but it's necessary, especially if you don't have the education yourself. if you're not going to dedicate an amount of time during your off season to educate yourself, then you're steadily behind the curve. So I wanted to step in, fill that gap, but not with touching money, but helping them understand money.
Understand money. No, that's definitely, and me working in this industry too, I've seen that from a different perspective, but it is a huge thing in the industry with a lot of these players in the NFL, NBA, MLB. I mean, it's I see it across the board with these sports marketing companies, not just sports marketing companies, but a lot of them dedicate so much money to buying a house for this person or buying a car for this person, and those aren't assets. Those are more liabilities, and I look at it from more the business perspective, like you said, and I kind of see, hey man, you could hire a marketing agency to kind of help you grow outside the field for as much as it would be for, a down payment on a house or one of those cars that you're buying, but you get to write all that stuff off, and it's just small things like that I see, and I'm just, and so I come at it from more a sports branding and marketing agency, a little bit different than the traditional agencies do, but I totally feel you. So with that said, what are some of these transitions that you see these players going through when they come when they go through that transition of leaving the game?
Well, obviously there's the shock of my paycheck is no longer the size of paycheck that it once was. So if you didn't prepare for that transition, you're definitely behind the eight ball. Hopefully, I also see and hear a lot of conversations about athletes knowing that their time is up. And now it's like the last minute rush of, oh my gosh, I'm about to retire. What am I going to do next? How do I get into broadcasting? Or how do I do this? How do I do that? Oh my gosh, I don't have any more money. Let me see if I can get another extension. And it's like, now there are a lot more resources, but even throughout the years, I would say probably like the past 5 years, there's still been people talking about this transition phase. Hey, you need to prepare yourself to move on. But it's especially if it's a younger player, it's definitely in one ear, out the other. People don't want to buy into the stats. I don't want to say it's macho or ego. I want to say it's a belief in themselves that I am going to beat the odds. I am going to last more than the average player, and it's not going to happen to me. So definitely not being prepared is the biggest thing when it comes to transitioning out of your profession.
Yeah. I've had a lot of players come to me and they are at that last leg. And they're like, hey, I need to think about this now. And I'm like, yeah, you should have thought about this a couple of years back. I mean, the players that are about, even the NFL only has a 2-year lifespan, average lifespan. So it's a little bit lower than the MLB and NBA. But trying to think about the transition a little bit earlier in their career and getting themselves set for success a little bit earlier. And yes, they don't have still focus a lot of time in the game because they're still playing. But yeah, they have off season. I mean, seasons are only depending on which profession you're in. The NFL is only half the year. So, maybe leverage one of those years one of those months for vacation and then separate some of those other months out and say, hey, I need to focus on this, this, and this. And if you have a team behind you like yourself or someone else, they'll be doing the work for you. It's a lot like being part of that team. So what are some of those challenges that you see? And I know we kind of talked about the difficulties of the transitioning, but what are some of those challenges that players have to overcome that, from your perspective, that you see?
I would say the number one challenge is acceptance. I would probably put it in like the stages of grief, separating from something that you've probably definitely dedicated more than half of your life to. Now it's coming to the end. You got to go through that phase, but the sooner you get to acceptance, the better off you'll be, because you'll be able to see other opportunities. You'll be able to be open to things that can come your way. But when you are in a place of you're mortified it's over, and you're bringing on this kind of doomsday mentality. I'm big on energy. So what you're doing is you're creating like this force field around you where you're just going to suppress yourself, and you're like automatically blocking good energy from the universe. You're blocking opportunities that could be flowing your way through energy because you are not giving the world positive energy. So getting over acceptance is definitely a major challenge.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I got into this, and I'll kind of explain a little bit where I'm going with it in a minute, was, as I started to grow my business, I started to see this, yes, some of it is about the money. I mean, you have to look at the money for growth and stuff like that, but it isn't really about the money. It's really about, you have this own identity that you can be proud of, that you're growing to help other people. And I kind of see it in a way where it's like, this is kind of probably very similar feeling that I get growing my business as players feel as they grow through, their career, and as they've felt the accomplishments of growing. So coming up, having that feeling, I tend to, tell players, hey, you could still be proud of something as you're kind of going through that. But I do have some of those feelings, like you're saying, those negative feelings of, it's kind of the business up and downs. You kind of get, I'm doing good. It's probably the same when players when they lose a football game, like, oh, I tried so hard. We did really good, but we still lost. How is that possible? And it's very similar. I call it I'll tell my wife, like, I'm just depressed today. I don't know why. It's the business depression. I'll feel better tomorrow. You just have those days. And it is, she has to tell me all the time, hey, you just have to be positive. You just have to keep going. And so you have to keep those positive lights in yourself to be able to move to that next step and set those goals. Because if you don't, you just end up, sitting on the couch and things, feeling bad for yourself. And it does. It kind of holds you back.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So do you have any recommendations on any sort of recommendations you could give towards that transition? I mean, I know that we're going to talk here in a minute about some of your future goals as you kind of move to that next step on helping athletes. So why don't we kind of combine that a little bit, and you can kind of explain maybe some tips and tricks, athletes can take for that mindset in that transition.
So I'm a firm believer that everything in life comes down to money. And some people, I'm wrong, you say some people, a lot of people will disagree. And, there's all the cliches that money isn't everything. Money can't buy you happiness, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't want to say that it's money in the tangible sense. It's money in the psychological sense. Understanding your relationship with money is the whole basis of my practice. And when you don't necessarily understand why you do the things that you do as it relates to money, why you spend the way that you spend, why you save the way that you save. Some people are avid savers, but they are totally afraid to invest. Like, all of that is psychological. So with that in a disarray, it's my belief that it is harder to put other factors or other faucets of your life into place. I want to say, for you stepping out to build your business separate from anything else, we talked previously, you made sure financials were in place, knowing your responsibilities. But I want to say that even your responsibility to how you utilize your money is also a big factor. Now, that is a good understanding. That's a good relationship. Some people don't have that. And when you're moving from a phase of transitioning from a high income to, let's just say, not as high income starting out, if you don't understand why you were doing the things that you were doing when you had the high income, you're definitely not going to understand how to maneuver with the income that's not as high, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. And I'll use an example right now, and I'll put myself out on a ledge here for people. What you're saying is accurate. me growing up, my parents ran a business. My dad was an NFL player for a while and became one of the top salesmen in the country for a certain industry. And, so I grew up around entrepreneurship, as well as football and soccer and sports. And that's one of the reasons I got into this. But I'm not saying my parents were bad with money, because I didn't really see how they did it. But that's a psychological aspect of how they handled money. I could have went two ways. I could have, also been bad with money, or I also could have been really good with money. And one of the things that you hit on was exactly somewhat where I'm at right now is to that point where I've done the opposite. I'm a saver. I'm a saver. I feel personally happy knowing that I have a cushion. And if I retire tomorrow, I could live for, the risk. I have less risk of, going out of business or losing my house or anything like that, because I have that cushion. But then comes that investment risk. Like you said, like I look at instead of an investment, I look at it more on the highs and lows of the risk. And I am at a gap period in my business right now to take to that next level, where I have to start investing more money and looking at the profit margin and stuff like that. And I, during COVID, just last month, had to take a huge investment in my business, which was hard for me to do. And it took a client of mine that was like, hey, we have to, do this with spend for next year because of this, and how good I've helped them grow. We've actually have to relook at their spend and lower their spend for the year of next year, so they can start pushing more towards other channels and the growth in their company. And I had to take a look back and say, oh, well, that's a lot of the spend for the company we have right now. And it wasn't meant to happen that way, but it just happened with how good we've helped them, and they've started to dedicate more money to us. And so I go, whoa, like I have to go back and look at my expenses, my finances, and I ended up spending more money on an investment because I had to take that risk. I'm like, all right, this is the time. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. So I looked at it exactly like you said, with the risk perspective, and said, all right, I can either go through the whole year and keep making the same mistakes, or I can take a risk, but also put an investment towards this other opportunity to try to push myself for future growth with this opportunity. And I don't know really where I was going with that, but more so just to say, hey, you have to sometimes get out of your comfort zone, like you said, and take those opportunities, and look at the bad sometimes and say, oh, I could have just looked at the bad. And I did. I'm not going to lie, for that first week or two, I was like, oh man, this is going to set me back this many years, and this is going to do this.
I shouldn't have done that.
Like, no, not with the investment, but with possibly losing the client / a big amount of our spend, our monthly, because we did have a crazy year this year, and I purposely was focusing on retention of my existing clients and saying, I'm not going to do client acquisition. No one's buying right now. And so I had to take that stand early on when I was going to do a big growth period and say, I have to hold off on this for a year. So it wasn't until last month when I was like, oh, this is the worst opportunity at this time this happened. And I was depressed, and I was like, my business is going to set back. And then I had a base to say, all right, I'm going to do an investment and take a risk on this. And coincidentally, that's not even in fruition yet, but with the positivity that I've had, my rep is, we have, opportunities for 3 or 4 more clients. And to me, it's just the mindset, like, oh, even the mindset shift, I'm probably going to make up that spend now by getting these additional clients that we have interactions with right now than I would, if I just let it be and get depression. So with what you're saying, I think it's true. I think and I went off on a little tangent there. I tend to do that when I have too much coffee for the day, but I tend to agree with you. You have to look positive, and you have to not just go with the flow, but you also have to be able to make decisions and look at your money accordingly. And I think with that gap period I was talking about in my business is very similar to, it is scary. It's a scary time. It's a lot like me starting my business. It's a scary time. And a lot like you making that transition. It's the same for players. I think that, you have to make this transition into, either the business world or the career world. It's really up to how you want to do it. And so if you choose the business aspect, find your passions, find something that could relate to what you're doing on the field that you really want to help with, so you still enjoy it, but also look at it as more of an investment and less so of I'm spending money on something,
Yep.
So why don't you, with that said, why don't you kind of go into your goals a little bit more, and what your goals are for as you grow this business of yours?
It's going to sound cliche, but I really just want to help people. Again, I do feel like that relationship with money piece is the core. I could probably say it's the core of every human being, but everyone doesn't have the means to make a substantial amount of money. And my own personal belief is that, if I was an athlete, if I had that capability to make the amount of money that they are able to make, no one would probably know me, because I would be off and I would be well into wealth status and probably sailing in the south of France. Like, that's my ideal. And I feel as though I have the experience, I have the knowledge, I have the years and years of research and implementation with others. It's like I can help some other people who are younger propel themselves. So I can help them shorten their learning curve. And that's what it's really about for me. Like, how can I help? I want to say lift someone up, and it's from the standpoint of I'm older and wiser than they're basically kids, like teenagers. They're coming into the league, 18, 19, 20 years old. So it's me giving back, lifting them up, but helping them shorten their learning curve to getting to their ultimate goal. Because it can't just be about the game. And if it is, you have to figure out what else it's about, because as we're mentioning the transition piece, you're going to fall short when it comes to transitioning.
Yeah, no, I totally see it. It comes with that experience. And I mean, I've spent a lot of money on just learning from my mistakes, but I look back on it and I needed to hit those mistakes and hit those so I could take it to the next level. And money is a huge piece. You're right. I mean, I'm very similar to you as I look at money as, like I have this cushion now, and it makes me feel better about growing my business, and it gives me that confidence so I can tell certain people, like, I'm sorry, I don't think we can help you. I think that this person may be more specific to your needs, because I don't have that pressure of needing to bring on more clients. And I think that helps with the perspective of, like you said, we can help who we can help. Because I'm in the same boat you are. I really want to help people. And I do. I want to take my business to a point where I can give money away. I can help, these nonprofits and these organizations help with kids and help with diseases and stuff like that. So I definitely agree with you on that. And to the point where, to a more positive note, let's kind of talk about a little bit about athletes and what they've learned in the game that can help them become. What do you think, from a positive aspect, what do you think that they've learned in the game that can help them become good business owners, or good in a career aspect?
Well, first and foremost, their tenacity, their dedication, their drive, those are all major strengths of someone who can make it in any instance that they're placed in. So that's something that they would definitely want to harness. But there's also a great reward to taking the time to figure out what exactly you want to do, what makes you happy. Are there businesses or opportunities that you notice that there's some things missing from the game? Maybe you want to create something or figure out a service that is much needed but overlooked in the sports realm. Or maybe you want to go a completely different direction. Maybe you have a secondary passion. And I I mean, you could just be the person that has big ideas but need help implementing. So you definitely have to double down on those strengths, but that work ethic is the core of greatness in any aspect. So I think when work ethic meets, I want to say purpose, but I kind of feel like for an athlete, they might base a lot of their purpose on their sport, but what's past that? So looking past, and I think it's probably hard to be in a position, especially if you're at the top of your game, but still knowing you got to look past it and see what's next. I know that's probably a tough situation to be in, but you have to do it. Otherwise, you know, we're all one injury away from something. You know, I can walk out, I can twist my ankle or break my foot or something, and that completely disrupts how I'm able to conduct myself. So the same thing could happen to an athlete.
And I agree with you. I think that drive is a huge thing. And back to what I was saying earlier, where I think that running a successful business is very similar to playing in the game. Drive definitely gets you, for anyone, as long as you have drive, and of course learning from, it's only one aspect. You have to learn from your mistakes and all that nifty stuff as well, but drive is different than ego. I mean, I do see players that come out and they're like, they think they can do it all themselves, and a business owner somewhat has the same thing. I mean, I've had to go through times where I've hired employees, and it comes with employee acquisition and stuff. That's a whole different subject, but where I have to learn, I have to let go a little bit. I have to let other people help me with this and that. And that's part of growing. It's like being on a team that, you know, a quarterback may throw the touchdowns, but a wide receiver catches, or the defense stops touchdown. You know, you have to look at the whole team. And so looking at it from a perspective of, you're allowed to ask for help. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. And that doesn't diminish your drive by any means. So I think that goes into my next question here, is some of the struggles that you think athletes may go through as they go through that transition of becoming a business owner.
Well, one, not having a good understanding of business is definitely going to be a struggle. Not having the right team in place. We reference having a team a few times. That is definitely going to be a big hindrance. What else? There's something else that's on the tip of my tongue. But yeah, I would even go as far as to say maybe having the right system and personnel or a team in place to help you navigate to the business is more essential than anything else. Because 9 times out of 10, unless it's something that you've experienced or you have a lot of knowledge in, you probably don't know the core principles of that business industry or particular business as it is. So,
and funny enough, you say that. I think that goes back to our first question on when you talked about working with smaller businesses compared to bigger businesses. I think that the difference, that the benefit that athletes have is they do have those expenses that they can make it to that next level a lot faster. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, we're going to spend $200,000 on building this business and having someone help us with it. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that a lot of smaller businesses have to either get an investment to do that, or they have to slowly climb there before they're able to realize, hey, this company costs this much. So where I'm going with that is having the capabilities of understanding, hey, when you played the game, for instance, you were a star at what you did. Like, you, even if you were second string or third string, you were better than 98% of the people out there that play the game. And that comes with the amount of practice, the amount of training, the amount of effort that you took in to build that. But it comes the same with business and the amount of hours it takes for certain people to do that. So if there's one thing of advice I could give athletes, probably very similar to what you would say, is every industry is hard. Every industry is busy. So look at specializations in certain people and what they do as quality. Don't always look at the numbers, because yes, something might cost more, but that just means that you're probably going to get a better ROI, or you're going to get a better, you're hiring someone with a lot more knowledge than what you would if you were, hiring someone off of Fiverr, I'll just say.
And the lessons learned are different.
Yeah, lessons learned are definitely different. Yeah. Let's go back to maybe how athletes start when they do that transition on building their brands, because I know branding can be designated. And you said you used to work for a sports marketing agency, so you have some of this knowledge a little bit. What are some things that athletes can learn in regards to building their brands, maybe from other business owners or from other athletes?
Definitely now it's leveraging the power of social media, establishing your voice that's authentic to you. And it could be a controversial voice, because controversy also sells, but having a stance. I think those are things that you can build upon, and you can go in many different areas, but people still have to know you. And a friend of mine, we had a really good conversation. I won't give all the details because it's his business plan that he's going to pitch, but we talk about how unless you really follow football, you don't know what these athletes look like when the helmet is off. And they have key stages where they can capitalize on that, but the league doesn't really do a good job at that. And from my perspective, that's a part of control and ownership. If you don't know what my athletes look like, if you don't know who they are, I'm diminishing their voice, or I have more control over their voice. And I've since learned that different contracts have different clauses for different athletes, or different teams have different clauses for their athletes on things that they can and cannot do to represent themselves as a personal entity. But leveraging the power of social media now and these days, you have a free platform. So knowing what you want your voice to be and what you want to stand for, that will also bring other opportunities. It might not be the big opportunity with a Nike or Adidas or something like that, but it could be a regional brand that's strong, that wants to put emphasis or put marketing dollars behind you, and that's also going to help lay the groundwork for when you transition. You can see how they conduct themselves, because again, that's a different line of business. So you've been in the business of sports for so long, now you're getting exposure into how this food company runs their marketing services and what their expectations are, or their apparel company or the auto company. These are different levels of exposure in different industries that you can capitalize on. It might even lead you to what you want to do when you transition out of sports. So having a free platform, but you also have notability, is going to be a key for anybody who can capitalize on it.
Yeah, when we're developing the athletes' brand identities, when we move forward with them, one thing we really focus on during the brand discovery is figuring out their voice, figuring out how they're going to talk to these people, not just to help turn their fans into customers, but to also, how are you going to say this without, because we do live in a society right now where you do have to worry about some things that you say and some things that you don't say. So making sure, for instance, an athlete's not going out there and preaching how great heroin is. You know what I mean? Like, don't say that and I'm using that as a very broad perspective, because I don't want to be at the risk of someone saying, oh, well, that's fine if someone says that. Or so you have to be very careful with what you say. But still being able to have that voice to what you believe in, and who is the audience that you're really trying to portray that to. Like you said, leverage their end game, but how do you do that with still keeping the team in mind, but still also doing something that you're able to have a voice for? Because athletes are the next influencers. People really look up to them. And even from a team perspective, the athletes are really what drive people watching the games. I mean, how many people do you think were Patriots fans that are now Buccaneer fans, because of Tom Brady? So being able to do that voice correctly. And I think to finish off the podcast, why don't we really talk about how about what you're really trying to do to help athletes and how you can help athletes moving forward?
So that's a great question. My whole thing is awareness. And I would like to say, like, I'm your cool therapist. I'm not the therapist that has the glasses and the notepad and that's writing notes and you're laying on the chase lounge and, unleashing what's on your mind or pouring out your heart. No, we're not doing that. We're having candid conversations about you, your background, the things that you like to do, the things that you like to buy, why you like to do that. We take that nice discovery on your triggers. So I have many, many examples, but let's just say you like fast cars. That's just, you've always liked fast cars. But what if you can track that back to, I grew up in Charlotte. I live close to NASCAR. I've never been to a race, but maybe you could hear certain things or certain things that were in your subconscious. You never paid it any mind to the fact that, hey, I didn't live far from the raceway. So figuring out those things, that's important to me because that'll help shift why you make the decision that you make. Hey, maybe that's a core part of who you are, having a fast car. So what do you need to do to sustain that desire? You need
desire without spending $1 million on 10 cars. Yeah. No.
Exactly. Maybe it's one car and not 10. So yeah.
I totally get you on that one. And I think that will really help their transition into if they end up opening a business in the business realm as well. Because I'll tell you what, finances and how to dedicate your finances are even tenfold in the business realm than they are personal. I look at the personal account and only seeing a few grand go back and forth every once. And I look at the business and it's like, oh, it's like tenfold going back and forth. So that's great. So I like that analogy with the cars. I think that's a really good one. We kind of say something very similar to when we talk to clients on, well, are you looking to buy, a Mercedes or are you looking to buy a Prius? Like, what are you looking at getting here when it comes to pricing of what you're looking at? So I want to thank you again for being on the podcast. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you?
The best place is Instagram at It's Taryn's World, ITSTARYN World. And
what I'll do is I'll end up, when we put this live, I'll end up throwing it up for everyone to see, and I'll share that information with them as well. So again, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. You can reach out to her, like she said, on Instagram. You can probably also find her on LinkedIn as well. I'll throw that up. I'll throw that up in the comments as well. And again, I want to thank you for being on the Brand Power Analysis podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.